Hey loves, it's Britt, and in this video I wanted to talk about Venus square Chiron in Synastry. So when your Venus is square to someone's Chiron or vice versa. So this seems to be a particularly karmic aspect. I do feel like maybe not in every case, but in some cases there is some sort of karma from a past life here that you've come to now work out. And that's why this relationship feels tinged with pain. It almost feels very much like this is not the first time that something has happened here, or at least that's how I've felt it. Um, yeah, so what happens with this synastry aspect is that the Venus person, when sharing their heart and their feminine energy and, all of their Venusian qualities in whatever way that manifests by the sign of their Venus, right? Whenever they're just being that Venus self, the Chiron person, it's like a little bit like, fingernails on a chalkboard, except like triggering their pain points, their Chiron, like pain points, which is really like the Chiron wound is this painful part of us that it does eventually become our healing gift. So a lot will depend with the synastry aspect on how aware the Chiron person is of their Chiron wound and like have they integrated it? Like what side of their Chiron healing journey are they on? Because Chiron represents the wound, but then it also represents when integrated the healing gifts, and a big part of our actual life purpose too is shown by Chiron. But when the Venus person is just, yeah, expressing themselves, expressing their heart, the Chiron person can feel very triggered and very much like the Venus person's energy is maybe not actually in line with their ultimate goals in life as well. There can be a lot of judgment here. There can be a lot of like the Chiron person maybe even seeing the Venus as like a little bit superficial about things that are like sacred to the Chiron person. So sometimes the Chiron person can actually feel like a lot older, even if the Chiron person is in fact the younger person. They can feel like the Venus person is maybe sort of superficial, or like they're definitely like the way that they express that Venus is very contradictory to what the Chiron person is deeply wounded in. So it can be especially triggering. It can be, depending on like how the Chiron person reacts, they might not want anything to do with the Venus person. They might think, you know what, you're just triggering to me. You're just like activating these painful parts of me. You're just like fingernails on a chalkboard. You're just giving me the ick, but with other contacts going on that are easier or more harmonious, then this might just be a minor issue of frustration in the relationship. So the Venus person can feel like the Chiron person holds some deep wisdom for them, but at the same time, they can also feel very judged by the Chiron person, or like maybe they're not good enough for the Chiron person. That like feelings of self-worth issues can come up for the Venus person. They can feel like rejected, or they can feel like that when they go to share their heart, they go to like flirt, even, right? They go to flirt or they go to express their sensuality, and the Chiron person is kind of like frozen, or like, like they can be kind of awkward around them. So the Venus person, if they internalize that, they can feel, yeah, they can feel rejected, they could feel unloved, they could feel judged. But, interestingly enough, it's not so much that the Chiron person is in fact judging the Venus at all. It's that the Chiron person is uncomfortable because the Venus is triggering them. So it's not always that the Chiron person is judging Venus, it's that sometimes the Chiron person is just triggered by the Venus person's love nature, and it just makes them kind of go into a frozen state, but really it's they have nothing against the Venus person. They're just super triggered by the way they express their love and their sensuality. So you could see this show up as like the Venus person flirting and the Chiron person kind of like shutting down and then, moving the topic to some sort of serious matter. Now, sometimes this can switch and we can see the Chiron person actually being the one reaching out to Venus and feeling all these deep feelings, and then Venus kind of being like, well, no, like, let's. So there can be an issue of timing here. There can be a feeling of like off on energy, like something not linking up as far as expressing your heart. Like maybe it's like a feeling of like this relationship being at the wrong time in the wrong place, or just kind of like irreconcilable differences kind of thing going on here. So that's kind of the karmic energy that I'm feeling, is like it can feel like something's not lining up here, but yet there's something very deep to work out. There's something to resolve. There's an issue of the heart here. Venus Chiron in general in Synastry can show a very deep love. When they're square, it can show that there is a tension trying to express that love. It doesn't mean that the love is not there. It means that for whatever reason we're different, and we can struggle to actually express that love, express our heart, and say what we feel. And so this one can be kind of restrictive, but at the same time, the square kind of pushes you to act. It pushes, it's frustrating. It's like, and so I think with the right amount of communication and actually, sharing how we feel, sharing, what is coming up for you as the Chiron person, letting Venus know that when you act like that, this is how I feel, and I'm not rejecting you, but I just get uncomfortable or I freeze up when you're acting like that. It's just not easy for me to always express my affections back. Or, Venus to Chiron, you could say, when I express my heart and I'm just being myself and like flirting with you, I feel rejected. And can you try to be more open to me? And like, I think with communication, this one can be resolved, but it definitely does have this eerie feeling of like something has happened here. We're working something out. It's a healing soulmate connection. It's one that can be resolved through, like I've said, kind of like a dialogue here, but it can often cause two people to shut down because it is painful. It does feel like this ancient wound has been stirred, and like the Venus person can feel really like shut down or unloved too by Chiron, and that can lead them to want to be elsewhere, right? And the Chiron person can feel just, so triggered and so confused even by the way that they feel about Venus and how it doesn't make sense, and it's triggering all this deep stuff for them. And if they're not knowing what to do with that, it can be especially uncomfortable. But I think the main thing to realize here is like the reason you're both so triggered is because there is love. There's something big going on here. There's something to be resolved. You want to really meditate on the signs that the square is taking place in, and that will really bring a lot of clarity to like what needs to be resolved here, and the issue of the conflict of the square, right? So you can really meditate on that. And I think that the square in certain signs works better, right? Like mutable squares can tend to be easier to work out. I mean, that's not a hard and fast rule, but it can sometimes be true. And yeah, like you also want to look at the sign and the house placement of the Chiron person's wound, and that's what's being triggered here. That's what they need to work on. It's not actually Venus's fault that they feel that way. They need to deal with that and take responsibility for that. And if they already have, then the more positive sides of this square can come out in Synastry, which is just that feeling of a deep love and like a healing love. Like this isn't a superficial contact. This is something very deep. This is something that's going to transform you. This is something, that will heal you. And it also can be a pretty big purpose activation for the Chiron person, because the way that the Venus person loves them triggers them into the healing crisis that then activates their purpose. So it can be very helpful in that way. I'd love to know your experience of this contact in Synastry. If you've had this square, what has it been like for you? I have had it on both ways, when it's my Chiron and when it's been my Venus. I think so for me, when I've had it with my Chiron, it works out a little bit better because my Venus is in conjunct my Chiron natally. So when I have someone's Venus square my Chiron, it's either trine or sextile to my own Venus. So it tends to work out very well. Now, on the other side, it's a little bit of a different thing going on, where then I'll have Chiron sextile Chiron or Chiron trine Chiron, but then it's square at my Venus. So it's I don't know. They're both interesting, but I'd love to know your experiences of this square. What has it been like for you? Let me know in the comments, you guys. And thank you for requesting this video. I'm doing all your requests. They're all on my list. And thank you so much for continuing to request these awesome aspects that aren't always talked about in the mainstream astrology world. So I love it. Thank you so much, you guys. Talk soon. Bye.